I'm fixing up this old Ross Apollo, and it needs pedals, and I found these pedals in my box of random pedals. They have a 1/2-inch shaft, and they had some rust. I cleaned it with a wire brush. I didn't want to go too crazy and give it that weird burnished look that over removal of rust gives you, but they look okay. The problem is the grease in them is old and there really isn't much. Now these pedals were not designed to be serviced, but I'm going to service them anyway. And the first thing I'm going to do is try to release these little tabs with a pair of pliers. I got these big pliers here, so I'm going to just straighten out the tabs. Or at least try to straighten out the tabs. Might have to end up using the vise to do this. So, looks like that one got straightened out. Now I'll flip it around in the vise. Straighten out the other tab. I think you want to watch out with this kind of stuff because you don't want to bend this back and forth too many times. So now, looks like the tabs are still holding. They're probably crimped pretty well at the factory, the Ross factory. Let me see if I can pop this off with a screwdriver. Alright, it looks like that one wants to come off, so let me see how I can get this to come off. This is actually the first time I've ever done this, so I don't know if it's even possible. Just trying to get a little bit more. You get a bigger screwdriver out of the toolbox, and you know what I'm going to do? Put this a little lower in the vise. I'm not too worried about the vise marring the pedals, because the pedals are rat traps. So now I can just pop this up. Now what I'm worried about here is that this whole thing's going to come apart and bearings are going to fly everywhere. So I got to be really careful when I pop the next side. Because if the bearings start flying everywhere, then that's a problem. So, and I don't really know what the configuration is. Okay. So now what we have is the pedal released from the cage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp the shaft of the pedal in the vise, just like that. Then I'm going to pull this off the top here to see what we have to work with. Adjust the camera a little bit. Now it looks like I may be what they call SOL, because, let's get that off of there, it looks like this was not designed to be serviced at all. In fact, honestly, I don't even know if there's bearings in here. See that? So this actually might be a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Now there's got to be some accommodation for grease, but it looks to me like this surface right here was kind of crowned over at the factory, and there's nothing in here that's serviceable. But since I have access to this now, what I guess I can do, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but yeah, so what I guess I can do is just take my little screwdriver here and my tub of grease, it's just axle grease that I got at the auto parts store, and maybe just try to massage a little bit of grease into these pedals. You know, and I don't know if this is ultimately going to be a bad idea, you know, if it's just going to be like a dirt trap. Try to get a little bit of grease in between. But this is weird. I normally you pull a pedal apart and there's a lock nut and a washer and there's bearings in there, but this doesn't seem to have any kind of bearings at all. So I don't know exactly what it's rotating on, but there are some signs that there was grease in here from the factory. You know, there's some petrified, dried up old grease. So I feel like if I can push some grease in here into this sort of, whatever you want to call it, it's not a bearing, but into this surface that rotates, then maybe that'll make the pedals a little bit better. So I guess I don't have to worry about bearings falling out, but this greasing process is going to be kind of crude. In fact, you know what? Let me try and use my fingers here to just push some grease in there. And I don't want to just get it in the lip. I want to get it underneath this sort of washer thing so that it's actually in the spot where the cone is riding. Alright, so now, even with just that minimum amount of grease, it feels a lot better already. So I'm going to clean my hand a little bit with a paper towel. Hate using a lot of paper towels in the shop. They're very expensive. I mean, they're not very expensive, but when you use a ton of them, they become wasteful. So now I'm just going to try and repeat this process on this other side, and this is going to be messy. What I'm trying to do here is just push grease into this, I guess it's like an axle, not an axle, it's a spindle tube. But there doesn't seem to be any bearing in there at all. So this must be just like a real cheap friction pedal. But I think it's going to work. You know, I could have, this is not a bike that's going to get a lot of use or anything, but so I could have just put it in there without any grease. But I want to make it as, you know, as pleasant to ride as possible, even in the limited capacity in which it's going to be ridden. So I'm pushing the grease in between the spindle and this little thing, and you know, I can always clean up the excess later once the whole thing is put back together. So immediately that's a lot smoother than it was. So now we're at like the 7-minute mark of this video, so let's try and put this thing back together and see if it goes together as well as it came off. And here's the parts. So what I'm going to do is just clamp this cage in the vise like I had it before. And like any good YouTuber, I'll put some links in the description where you can buy your own vise and whatnot. But I got mine, I don't know, used, probably didn't pay much for it. Now I'm going to try and get this pedal back together, and that might be a little bit of a task. Okay. Got it lined up. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of push it down with the blade of the screwdriver. I don't want to get too aggressive here. I don't necessarily want to get a hammer out. But I might have to get a hammer out. Let me see if I can use the pliers to kind of ease it down. Alright, I got it on that side, so let's use the pliers on this side to bend that tab, and now it'll stay on that side. Now this side, it's not quite down all the way. Let's see. Kind of push the pliers against it, and there it goes. Down all the way. Bend the tab over. Bend the tab over a good amount. I don't anticipate that this pedal will ever be serviced again, so I'm not too worried about it breaking off. And bend this one over. Bend this one over. Now I'm going to take my paper toweling. My science teacher never called it a paper towel, he'd call it paper toweling. Get some paper toweling. And the difference, now granted, if you use this pedal like in a dusty area, it's going to attract dust and dirt, but the difference is just remarkable in terms of the smoothness that it has versus what it had before. so I'm going to do a little bit more grease removal. But now I have a nice, smooth, a little bit greasy, but a nice, smooth, rideable, serviceable pedal for my Ross Apollo. And let's get a slightly better shot of the finished product there. And that took about 10 minutes according to the time on the video. And this is the first time I ever did one of these in my life. So very, very easy project there. And it made a world of difference on this fairly worn out old pedal that's now going to see some new life. Thanks for watching, and good luck.